The way we learn, I mean, you think about how you and I learn today. We read things, we watch videos, we ask
open
people,
dialogue, yeah.
we talk to each other, and that's how we learn. We don't, say it's got to be force-fed down my throat for 7 hours while I'm sitting in a room that I don't want to be in.
Like, I agree with pretty much everything that you're saying, but I'm asking you tough questions.
Yeah.
Like, I'm still asking, and that's part of how you learn.
Yep, exactly.
$183? Something that
Sweet. Now we're talking.
DeAngelis, dude, you might be my biggest guest, actually.
All right, cool.
Yeah, you
I'll take
are Corey DeAngelis. You wrote the book, The Parent Revolution. You are like the most famous school choice advocate in the United States.
I'll take it.
Yeah, you were literally on Newsmax just now?
Yeah,
from
yeah.
Newsmax
I had
to the
I had
tricycle?
to get off the suit because it's so hot out here in Austin. So.
Yeah, what made you want to go down this journey?
Yeah, I actually started as a researcher. I did a Ph.D. in education policy. So you can call me doctor, but I'm not a real doctor.
But you identify as a doctor, and that's what matters.
I'm more like a Jill Biden doctor.
Well, Corey, you identify
so,
as a doctor.
So that's what I am today.
You identify as a doctor.
But yeah, so I did a lot of research on these different types of school choice initiatives and found my first study linked school choice to crime reduction. So a lot of people talk about education policy and changing test scores, doing better on math and reading, but it shouldn't also surprise us that if you get a better educational path, you're going to be less likely to be involved with the criminal justice system, more likely to graduate high school, and so on and so forth.
Not complain that you're poor because of Donald Trump or the patriarchy, and you're not going to be wearing an Eat the Rich shirt going to these stupid protests so I can make fun of you dressed as you. Yes.
Exactly. And Trump actually won the parent vote this time around by 9 points. He also won on the issue of education. There were 2 polls right before the election from Atlas Intel. They were the most accurate pollster from the past 2 elections, and they found they were the only ones that I saw that asked voters who they preferred, Kamala or Trump, on education, and he won on education, which to you and me that might not be surprising, but for decades the Democrats have had a double-digit advantage on education because they've always thrown more money at the problem, but now people are seeing the Republicans as the parents' party, seeing that they're allowing families to choose the school that works best for them, but also to raise their own kids in the way that they would like.
Yeah. So just for clarification, to those who may wear a mask alone to drive their vehicle, what exactly is school choice?
Yeah. So I'm glad that nobody on the pedicab has their mask on today, which is fantastic.
Oh yeah. I mean, I wore a mask during COVID, but it was a Captain America mask.
There you go. Yeah. Layman's a quick definition of school choice. In the U.S., currently, when you don't have school choice, you're assigned to a school just based on where you live, and all your taxpayer dollars that's meant for your kid goes there, regardless of how well they do, regardless of whether you like it or not, regardless of whether you pay out of pocket to go to private school, your taxpayer dollars still go to that assigned school, which gives it tons of monopoly power. So school choice is any initiative that allows you to take that money that's allocated for your kid to a school other than your assigned school. It's the basic concept is the money follows the child. In America today, we spend about $20,000 per kid. In Texas, it's about $17,000 per kid. And so school choice initiatives allow you to take some of that funding to a private school, charter school, homeschool.
What about going to a public school in like a different neighborhood?
Yeah, that's another form of school choice. So you can transfer to one that you're not assigned to. Allows the money to follow the child to another school. So if you like your public school, you can keep your public school. For real this time, unlike with your doctor, with Obama's promise on you can keep your doctor.
Well, I use a company called Crowd Health, actually. Are you familiar with them?
I'm not.
You should, I will talk about this after the pod is over. But Crowd Health is actually great. They it's like a health sharing thing.
Oh, okay.
It's a health sharing network that basically every monthly contribution that you put in goes to everybody else's medical bills, and you get billed like once a month, and they give you a generosity score. Based on how generous you are, and the money's automatically taken out, and you just do one donation like a month. So like you break your arm, $5,000 medical bill, everybody, 100 will give $50, and the problem gets solved.
A lot less costly than this monster system we have.
And they also have a partnership with a company called, I'm not even paid for this.
See, I don't know about this because I went to public school, so my mind has been corrupted from it already.
Right.
I didn't learn as much as I could have in an alternative
Exactly, yeah. And so they also have a partnership with a company called Fold, which is a Bitcoin-based credit card, and they will put whatever the money is like saved from the account that you didn't spend on bills goes into your own Bitcoin account, so that you can actually save money and accrue a better investable asset over time.
Fantastic.
Anyway.
And so, like with these policies that I just described, Texas had their House Education Committee meeting on the issue yesterday, and we have the votes for the first time in Texas history to make it happen. They have 76 co-sponsors in the House, which is the number of votes that you need to pass a bill in the Texas House. So after this session, Texas will be the 16th red state to go all in on school choice in the past 4 years alone. We've had a lot of momentum because the unions showed people what was happening in the classroom through Zoom school when they fought to keep the schools closed. That sucked for a lot of different reasons, but parents had an eye into the classroom. They saw the indoctrination going on. They saw the critical race theory, the gender ideology, and parents who thought that their kids were doing fine based on their test scores started to see something else was going on, and so they started to push back. They were called domestic terrorists at the school board meeting.
FBI, the FBI
labeled
them, yes.
They did. They created a threat tag from the FBI for the parents at the school board meetings. And so parents said, to hell with this. We need to be able to vote with our feet. If you're not going to listen to me, if you're going to cut off my mic while I'm speaking at the school board meeting, I need to be able to go somewhere else. And so competition works in every other industry. It works in education too. We've also seen that when these programs expand, you look at Florida, for example, the outcomes get better. They most recently
number one in education.
Number one in education. They spend 27% less than the national average, and they have competition. They have universal school choice. All families can. They have over 500,000 kids using school choice programs in Florida right now, and
so
their outcomes have gotten better.
So let's say I'm an African American, and I'm in a really bad neighborhood. And I go to a Title I, a really low-funded, really bad Title I school that has terrible test results and has a disproportionate track record of funneling kids into the criminal justice system. Under school choice, am I able to theoretically send my kid to school instead of going, instead of like Reagan High School, for example, in Austin, right? I could send them to Bowie.
Yeah, so there's different types of school choice initiatives. This
or Austin High or something.
Yeah, so some of them are public to public. Some of them are, if you exit the public, you get a savings account where you could use for a private school or a homeschooling option. So what you're describing is something called open enrollment, where you can. That's kind of the most basic form of school choice, transferring from one public school to another public school. A lot of these open enrollment policies don't let you take that money to a private school, though. My biggest advocacy is for having the most amount of options for the parent. So while some Democrats might even be on board for public-to-public transfers, I think it should be for everybody. We should go all in. That money, we shouldn't discriminate based on the type of school that works best for a kid. It's like saying, well, you have choice to choose the drink that you're going to have at dinner, but it has to be a Coca-Cola.
Coke or Pepsi, yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
You knew exactly where I was going with that.
I understand exactly this. Are you worried though that if you start getting if they start allowing you to use the taxpayer-funded money to send your kid to private school, are you not concerned that the private school might just start raising their prices, just like the universities have been raising their prices, knowing that you're infinitely borrowing from the federal government?
No, there's not a lot of studies on this, but there's one from the Heritage Foundation. They found, if anything, that states that have expanded school choice, their private school tuitions have increased at lower rates than in states that don't have school choice. And the reason for that, it might seem counterintuitive at first. You might think demand increases, well then prices should increase as well, but that's not taking into account the other side of the equation. Basic Econ 101 also tells us that when supply increases, prices drop, and when competition increases, prices should have a lower pressure to increase as well.
Right, because now more kids are going to be able to choose to enroll at different private schools.
Not just private schools. With the ESAs, with those savings accounts, you can use the funding at micro schools. You can use them for online learning. So that also creates more competition for the private schools than they had before. So they should have an incentive to lower their prices if they want to keep their customers. And that's the best evidence we have is from the Heritage Foundation, showing in states that have done this. So with universities. With the university system, I wouldn't want to increase scholarships at the university level because relative to the status quo, that's more government intrusion.
Yes.
Whereas today, we have 90% of kids in government-run schools at the K-12 level. Allowing families to have the choice to take that money somewhere else is an incremental step in the right direction away from government involvement. So I think it's a step in the right direction, even if it's not utopia.
When I get a tax credit, so we were talking about off camera that my girlfriend and I were trying to conceive and everything like that. When we do have children, and I do want to homeschool, would school choice provide me with that $10,000 tax credit to homeschool my kid?
Depends on the program, but in Texas, the proposal right now is it would be $2,000 per year. I think it should be equal. It should be for private school scholarships, the proposal is $10,000. The government schools, it's $17,000. They shouldn't discriminate based on the type of school that works best for you.
No, universal, 10K, cap it.
Yeah,
you
could use it for homeschooling, but you wouldn't just be able to pocket the money. You wouldn't be able to have 5 kids and say, you'd have to use it for expenses related to homeschooling. So like curriculum, you could use it for a private tutor, but you'd have to use it for some type of education expense.
So that was my next question is like, how do you know someone's not going to just pocket the money and not teach them any? Okay, so you have to show an audit that this is what we got to do with the money.
Exactly.
Okay.
So you can't use it for a big screen TV, even though they have big screen TVs in government schools. Can't use it for a copy.
So there's schools in Texas that have built $20,000, $6,000
La Jolla ISD
park,
and water parks. And they use the money on administration. It doesn't even go to the teachers. If you look nationwide, since 2000, the number of students in the U.S. has increased only slightly by 5%. Number of teachers by about twice that rate, by about 10%. The number of administrators, get this, have increased by about 95% nationwide.
Wow.
It's become a jobs program for administrators as opposed to an education initiative for kids. But that also means less money for teachers. The teachers that are doing a good job, well, first of all, they get paid the same as the crappy teachers, so they leave the profession. And since 1970, per student spending in the U.S. has increased by about 170%. After adjusting for inflation, teacher salaries have only gone up by 3%. In real terms.
Yeah, so what
it's not making its way to them.
Why would the Democrat Party, which is supposed to be in line with equality, equity, supporting teachers, supporting optimal student learning, why would those people be? You would think that this would garner widespread left-wing support.
It does when you ask voters. And if you look at the latest polling from the University of Houston within Texas, this is a trend nationwide as well, they find supermajority support, 67% support across the board for school choice, and the lowest demographic of support when you broke down race and political ideology was for white Democrats, and that was still a majority support. 52% of white Democrats, according to the University of Houston poll, showed that they supported the proposal for education savings accounts, school choice in Texas. So, but the thing is, when you look at the elected officials, they unanimously, almost all the time, vote against school choice, and that's because the Democrat Party is a wholly owned subsidiary of the teachers union.
But it's not just, hold on. I agree with 90% what you just said.
Yep.
But it's not it's not just the Democratic Party. There's a uniparty. There's a whole apparatus. It was taking place in Texas. I've seen some of your interviews.
They have voted against school choice in the past.
A lot of Republicans do because they're in the pockets of the teachers unions.
Yep.
And another thing that people don't understand is like a lot of the left-wing talking points will say, "Oh, look at these billionaires. Look at these Republican grifters. They are going after unions. Why aren't they going after billionaires who don't pay their share of taxes?" And then I'm gonna finish. That's what the objection is going to be, right?
Yeah.
But here's the thing that people don't understand, and it's that if you look at how unions are funded, they're funded by through taxes, they're funded through contributions, they're funded through taxpayer funds, they're funded through dues by members. They're also funded through private money that I don't think that you even need to disclose how you're even getting the private money. So let's say Bill Gates or George Soros, I know we're throwing names out, even Elon Musk, hypothetically, right? They could give $10 billion to a teachers union.
And they might not know it.
No one knows exactly where the money came from. The foundation, now as a result of that, the foundation or the nonprofit that you decided to own gets a huge tax write-off because you gave a bunch of money to a teachers union, and now the teachers union is incentivized to teach a curriculum in order to create higher profit margins for mega companies versus creating self-actualized adults who can independently contribute to the economy and to the country.
Yeah, I'll quickly respond to the Texas issue. They had 21 Republicans vote with all the Democrats in the House last year to kill school choice. It's on their own party platform, but when I look back, 18 of the 21 were endorsed by the state affiliate of the NEA, the largest teachers union. After the primary elections, voters held them accountable finally, and 2/3 of them lost their seats, which basically never happens in politics. If you're in, you're basically in for forever until you decide to quit. But 2/3 of the time they lost when, on average, they only lose their incumbent seats about 5% of the time. So they lost about 67% of the time after voting against school choice. And when it comes to the school system, I agree with you that it was actually founded out of Prussia, our compulsory education system, modern day Germany. They created this system of compulsory education to create obedient factory workers, foot soldiers for the military after they lost the war. And we had our father of public education, Horace Mann, who actually homeschooled his own kid. He was a total hypocrite.
That's so funny and there's a private school called Horace Mann in Riverdale.
Yep, and that's
which is
where
I
it comes
grew up.
from.
Yeah.
And so he was the Secretary of Education in Massachusetts at the time in the 30s, and he imported the Prussian model to America, and you see some remnants of that where it's more about obedience than actual learning, which is good for obedient factory workers, not so much for people who are self-actualized.
And it's also really good for funneling people into jails and prisons where they can be exploited and used for cheap labor as well.
Yep, and if you look at the money where we can track with the teachers' unions, Randy Weingarten's union, she's the head of the AFT. They lobbied the CDC to keep schools closed to get more money. 99.9% of her campaign contributions that you can actually see went to the Democrats in 2024, and it's been like that for at least 3 decades now. It's a money laundering operation, and it's why you have so many elected officials voting against school choice, because they're listening to special interest, but they're not listening to the people. When you poll the voters, they support the concept. When you look at them, the people, when school choice is passed, they use it in large numbers. In Arizona, when they passed their school choice program in 2022, the government website actually shut down because so many families were applying, and now we have like 100,000 families using private school choice in Arizona in a short amount of time.
How do you feel about my shirt?
Let's say, dare to keep off drugs. Hey, it's your choice.
Well, do you remember what I'm trying to say? Do you remember the DARE program?
Didn't work.
It didn't work, but
it backfired.
What if you had to describe the DARE program in one word? What word would you use? It begins with a P, and ends with a Ganda.
Propaganda.
Yes.
But so I just think, maybe that should be left to the parents to decide for their own kids.
But here's what I'm trying to say about this, right? And it's that if I went to school, if I was a parent in the 1980s, and my kid was being brainwashed in school saying that if you smoke a joint, you're going to become a crack addict, and that you're brainwashing people into thinking that we need to have this overly punitive model for nonviolent drug use. I'm not talking about fentanyl. I'm not talking about like any hard drugs. I'm talking about smoking weed and doing mushrooms, which are scientifically proven to be healthy for you, right? If you actually like do the research and if you do it in the right, if you use
it's probably less dangerous than alcohol
or prescription drugs or the hormone blocks they give to kids, all that stuff, right? But what I'm trying to say is if I'm a parent in the 80s and I don't want my kid learning bullshit, I want to be able to opt out and take my kid to a better learning environment. And so it's not just because you're opposed to critical racist theory or radical gender ideology or or having sprinkles the drag queen read to your 5-year-old kid. It's also as a backstop for if things go too far to the right, which I noticed on X. Like, I wouldn't want my kid being inundated with right-wing, white nationalist identity politics either.
Yeah, I mean, I think the parents mostly want the schools to focus on the basics, math, reading, and writing, than anything. And then when it comes to cultural issues, that should be the job of the parents at home to instill their values with their children. So it could go both ways. And actually, one time I wrote about this in the Wall Street Journal. I was trying to think of, choice is beneficial to everyone, kind of like what you're saying, to the left and to the right, if it goes the other way. And I asked in a survey, if this happened, would you support a voucher to go to a private school? And Democrats were highly supportive of if we said, if your school did not have a mask mandate, they really wanted the mask mandates, would you support a voucher to go to a school that had the opposite policy? And they overwhelmingly said yes.
So in Nazi Germany, they they
banned homeschooling.
They did that, but also here's what they also did in Nazi Germany too. And you know how they inundate, especially in big city urban environments, they inundate people with woke left-wing woke perverse left-wing ideology and stuff with the pronouns, the gender. I mean, that's the hot button, right? But
yeah.
You know how they're doing that now? In Nazi Germany, they inundated people with race science. Like, there were actual courses about how to spot a Jew.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like how you can tell by a Jew, how you can find the Jew based on what their nose looks like. How being like a half, they had racial laws where if you had Jewish parents, you couldn't participate in German society and all this other stuff. And it just went full. It was actual full-blown wokeness, but James Lindsay calls it the woke right. And it was a prime example of what the woke right is what you see in Nazi Germany. And, being what you're seeing right now with the public schools in big cities is the total inverse doppelganger effect of what Nazi Germany was like in the 1930s.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these people have infiltrated the government school system, realizing they don't even have to have their own kids anymore. They can use the government school system to control the minds of other people's children. And so if you want to fight back against this drift towards socialism at a national scale, I think you're going to have to do more than just having more kids, because 90% of kids, you got millions of them churning through that government school system, learning that the big government is the solution to all their problems. To fight back, you have to take back control of the schools, but also I think the better solutions from the bottom up. This is why I advocate for school choice, because I don't know what the best curriculum is going to look like for someone else's kids. I don't want to dictate that to someone else, and I don't think we should have a one-size-fits-all system. So if we have people voting with their feet, they'll be able to sort to schools that align with their values. You might also incentivize the public schools to focus more on the basics, because you're right, they won't want to piss off anybody on either side. And so they won't go too far right or left.
Yeah. And they're going to be upset because they're going to have to work a lot harder. But good, you're supposed to work super hard, because you're in charge of shaping the future of America. Like, that is your job as a school administrator and as a school teacher. And also, school choice creates competition, which will increase teacher pay for everybody.
Exactly. Well, the good ones, at least. I mean, the unions fight against teacher pay for performance, and so the best teachers say to hell with this. They go somewhere else. There's actually about 4 or 5 studies on the topic, not a lot, that find that when you have more charter and private school competition, the public schools start to pay their teachers more.
Corey, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
How do you measure performance?
If the parent is voluntarily choosing that institution,
no,
and
I mean,
if they're
like,
satisfied
for
with it.
For teacher pay relative to performance, how do you measure performance?
I would measure it based on demand, how many people want that teacher for their kids. So there's a lot of different metrics for school quality. I don't think standardized test scores are the way to go. It shouldn't be a one metric to rule them all. It should be multidimensional. I think maybe you can look at things like parent surveys, peer surveys, the surveys from their boss. Like, how do you measure performance in any industry? People kind of know who the best performers are, and it might not be a perfect metric, but we have heuristics to figure these things out. How do we know what the best restaurant is? We can look at the 4.5, 5-star reviews, but you also want to look into those things and see what other people have said. We don't look and say, oh, their menu says that they're rated by the state. Some of them do have these A ratings, from the food safety stuff and whatnot, but otherwise, we kind of have a sense of what is good based on what we like too. One grocery store or restaurant might be fantastic for you if you like Indian food, for example, but if I don't like spicy food or whatever it is, I might like another type of restaurant based on what works for me. Well, and so I think schools can kind of work.
I have a really good idea for teacher pay. It's either a really good idea or a terrible idea. And I think that you should be required to give 2% of your annual salary or capital gains tax, whatever, like your annual total aggregate earned income every single year, to your top 5 favorite teachers that you had throughout school. And it's not like you do 2% per teacher, just total, like 2% gets divvied among those 5 teachers, up to 5. It could be only one teacher that gets it, right? Mm-hmm. And then this way, you start incentivizing teachers to teach children skills that will make them high-performing and high-contributing adults.
I think I would support that if it was a reallocation of existing funds, so not on top of what we're already, because I already think we're spending too much, but we should spend what we're spending more wisely, and I think that's one way to do that, to incentivize performance.
I think that'd be a really good idea, because imagine if you had I'm trying to think. Imagine if Elon Musk.
The only thing I can think about that is that you're looking back at your own experience, right, and then allocating the resource. What if that teacher's no longer in the system anymore because you get older?
It doesn't matter. They get it forever.
Oh,
they get it forever. The people still deserve to retire. Yeah,
retirement.
You get it forever.
Yeah. Okay. Or you could dedicate it to the school that you think did the best job, but then you only have one experience of one school, then I guess you'd either...
You can, if you choose not to allocate it to a teacher, then you can choose to also allocate it to the school, but at least some of that money should have to go to and you know what, though? If a school did a really good job, the school is nothing without its teachers.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. And so if you're allocating the resources at the building level, if they're not doing a good job, you're not going to have a teacher. They would have to figure out what do we do with our workforce to do a better job.
So it's got to be to a teacher.
Well, either way, I think, because if you're allocating to the building and they're seeing that they're not getting funded because they're not doing a good job, my point is that, well, now they'll either have to change their leadership, they'll have to change the teaching body, or incentivize the teachers from within.
And it's a long process. It's not
yeah.
it's not an overnight fix. It's gonna, like, even with how Trump is fixing the economy, there's gonna be some pain with how he fixes the economy. With getting rid of a lot of the bloat, getting rid of a lot of the waste.
An alternative proposal could be for your kids that are in school right now, what are the teachers who are doing the best job? And then you can alternatively allocate the resources that way, so it's concurrent. So because things change over time. What if like 20 years later, what if the teacher like became like a huge problem and like started to, get involved with
bullshit,
illegal activity and whatnot?
Oh, well, you should be able to every single year you decide, right? Like you just
redetermine.
Yeah, you redetermine every year. But most people are going to leave it blank and not do it unless it becomes a problem.
So we're about to abolish the Department of Education.
Yeah. So how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. The U.S. Department of Education is unconstitutional. It's a waste of time and money. It has spent nearly $2 trillion since inception. It started in 1979. It was a political payoff by Democrat Jimmy Carter to the teachers union, the NEA. He wanted their endorsement. Things haven't gotten better. The outcomes have gotten worse. The funding has gone up. We spend more than any other country on the planet. And all of the stated goals of the department haven't been fulfilled. Our achievement gaps have gotten worse. Test scores have most recently come out showing decades of learning loss. The international assessment just came out called the TIMSS, showing that we dropped by more than every other country since 2019, except for Iran, Kazakhstan, and one other. We dropped by 18 points in math for fourth graders. And it's an international embarrassment, and we spend more than anybody else. So why do we need all of these departments of education if each state already has one of its own? We don't need an additional one. There's a bill in Congress to send education back to the states, block grant that money back to the states, and any useful things that are happening under the department right now would be allocated to different departments. So like any civil rights protections, those would move under the Department of Justice. Special needs programs, those which they're not doing a good job right now. We have the special needs laws right now, and they're not actually doing a great job for the kids with special needs. But nonetheless, though, in the proposal in Congress right now, that would move under the Department of Health and Human Services. So it wouldn't be as disruptive as many of us would like, but
yeah, because you're going to still create the same problem that you're talking about. It'll just be now you're fighting the state, but it's a step
but
you
have
in the right
less
direction.
bureaucracy, right?
It's a step in the right direction.
You'd be paying fewer people in D.C. to just paper push and tell the states what to do.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
And Linda McMahon just announced this kind of death by 1,000 cuts approach, because a lot of people have said, well, in order to abolish the department, you can't just snap your finger. You can't do it through executive order. You have to have the votes in Congress. And while Republicans have a majority, they don't have a supermajority. And in the Senate, in order to invoke cloture to stop the filibuster, you need 60 votes. You need a 3/5 majority, and I don't see 7 Democrats coming along on this issue. So maybe they lose some elections over that. I mean, they unanimously voted against the Protecting Women and Girls in Sports Act, too.
Which is ludicrous.
Yeah, it's an 80-20 issue.
And it's really unfortunate because I think most of my viewpoints are in line with what I thought the Democratic Party
on social issues,
yeah.
But now they're becoming the party of big government.
Well, they've always been the party of big government. You just see it now.
Yeah, it's not just the economy anymore. It's they're controlling our lives too.
Yeah, it's not really big government. It's corporatism and it's fascism, and it's under the guise of woke ideology. So the stuff that we talk about with like the Nazis and stuff like that, the Democrats are doing today's Democrat Party is doing a lot of similar things. They're just dressing it. They're putting like lipstick on a pig.
Well, I mean, in the 1930s, Nazi Germany banned homeschooling with criminal punishments, and you have some Democrat-aligned people calling for either
they're doing that in Germany
over-regulating.
now, dude.
They are. They still have those same laws on the books today with criminal punishments, which was really awkward when they closed the schools for COVID and people basically had to homeschool. I guess they put that on pause during that time, but right when we had our school closures in 2020 in the U.S., there was a Harvard professor named Elizabeth Bartholet. She put out an 80-page law review article arguing to essentially ban homeschooling right when everybody started doing it. Talk about a lack of self-awareness or just not being able to read the room.
Yeah,
it fell on deaf ears. People said, to hell with that. We're already homeschooling anyway. And a lot of families saw that they liked it. A lot of families who weren't going to homeschool at all said, and maybe they weren't confident. They found that confidence to do it. They got a taste of homeschooling, and they said, hey, I could do this better than the government school system at a fraction of the time.
There's also a huge drop-off in terms of physiognomy and mental health regarding today's public school teachers. You know, like I look at people who are teachers that I give rides to, and I'm just like, I look at the way they're dressed, I look at the way they communicate, I look at how they're managing money. They're hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt with no hope, with no way out. They're overwhelmingly they've overwhelmingly become political activists to one side. And in order to I think in order to really convey like success through education, there's a term, and I tried to be a teacher when I first moved here. It's called modeling, and you want to model appropriate behavior so that your students can carry that behavior and these traits over to life, so they can become the adults that you mold them into. And then when you look at them, when you look at so many of the people teaching your kids, like if I'm a parent,
is that the role model you want?
That's not the role model I want.
There's actually a study on who goes into the teachers' colleges, the colleges of education in America. There's a few studies, and some of them find that the teaching profession has some of the lowest SAT scores, a lot of other academic measures of basically proxies for IQ. And they also find, I had a colleague at the University of Arkansas, he was a co-author on a paper that looked at the risk aversion of people going into teaching, and they had a much higher
scales in the world.
Yeah,
they're highest on risk.
So they know they have the highest job security. They're not paid for performance, and so I'm not going to say all teachers like this, but you know the ones who aren't like this, a lot of them leave the profession and find that they can make more doing something else. But I will say the teachers in the current U.S. education system.
And you punish kids who are successful, and you punish kids who have the ability, mind frame, and have this like odd spark to actually make a discernible difference in the world. And you punish them by overly medicating them, or by by doing all types of other things to them, by like demeaning them, diminishing their.
Yeah,
like,
if I'm not interesting, that means that you have a problem as a kid, and we're going to say that you have ADHD, and which can be a real problem, but I think it's overdiagnosed with the government school system, especially for young boys who naturally, they learn by moving around and they're fidgety, and that doesn't mean they have a problem. It might mean that the teacher's not interesting, and it might mean that they're just young boys, and they should learn through natural learning with the environment. And so I really like this idea of the unschooling concept where, you know, you're not just doing schooling at home like with many homeschool programs, but you're just allowing kids to be kids, and you can direct their learning, make sure that they're not going off and just, you know, focusing on things that aren't going to improve their lives. Yeah. But it's
there's got to be there's a pattern though.
The way we learn, I mean, you think about how you and I learn today. We read things, we watch videos, we ask
open
people,
dialogue,
we talk to each other, and that's how we learn. We don't, you know, say it's got to be force fed down my throat for 7 hours while I'm sitting in a room that I don't want to be in.
Like I agree with pretty much everything that you're saying, but I'm asking you tough questions.
Yeah.
Like I'm still asking, you know, and that's part of how you learn.
Yep, exactly. And you have to be able to engage in debate. But too many people in the government school system, you see how they argue against school choice, for example. It's all ad hominem. They engage in logical fallacies. They attack the messenger. They don't attack the logic of your arguments. And so I think that's kind of the problem with people going through the school system. They don't tolerate others' views.
It's appeal to emotion versus appeal to logic. And I've had teachers in my cab that say, oh, I will never vote for Trump because I'm a teacher and he's going to destroy the Department of Education and our schools are so underfunded and look at how poor the performance is. And I'm like, yo, repeat what you just said.
Yeah, it exists today and they have poor performance. So
yeah, repeat everything that you just said.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, unbelievable. It is truly, it's like, it's a fear-based mechanism that's
a lot of people say, well, we need the public schools so that we can have a cohesive, peaceful democracy. We have a public school system today, and we don't have that. We have a lot of divided people all across the country, and most people go to the public schools. Maybe they learn to not tolerate others' views because their teachers are telling them to attack each other, to engage in friendly debates. They shut out all debate and any chance that they get. And there's actually a lot of research on this. My dissertation chair, Patrick Wolf at the University of Arkansas, he actually did a comprehensive meta-analysis on these studies of what happens when people get school choice. Does society become more divided, or are those kids more tolerable of others? We actually find over and over again, the majority of the evidence, vast majority, shows that when people get school choice, relative to the kids in the public schools, they're becoming more accepting of others' views, and I think it's because they focus more on logic and they actually get a good education as opposed to attacking each other. And I won't say every private school is better because there's a lot of private schools that have woke garbage too, but relative to the status quo, when parents get a choice, they're going to choose something that's less divisive
Yes.
and ideological.
And if you don't know how to learn, you are going to gravitate towards extremism no matter what side you're on. You're either going to think that there's 72 genders, or you're going to think that the Holocaust doesn't exist. And there's not really a middle ground if you don't understand how to learn.
Yep,
and
exactly.
the purpose of teaching and the school system needs to be teaching people how to learn. I always said that with all the transgender books and stuff like that, you know, you just replace those books with a book on gardening and a book on financial management, and this problem would get solved immediately.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of the people in the Democrat Party in particular are saying that this is book banning, but when you can go find the books on Amazon, the book hasn't been banned. And the reality is every public school has a limited number of books that it can have in it, and also a limited scope of what the curriculum, you have to figure out what to teach, right? And only so many things can be included in the curriculum. And so if you swap these things out with financial literacy, like, why don't people learn how to do their taxes anymore? Maybe that's a good thing, though, because I don't really like paying taxes anyway. But we have to do it.
Well,
we have to
with
operate.
what our tax money's being spent on, like we're giving money to we're literally giving
Trans
money,
surgeries.
transgender mice, Corey. Transgender surgeries on mice and sex hormones to transgender monkeys to see if it would help them in the process of medically transitioning. And so then from the left, it's like, wait a minute, most people on the left, I would say, are
Is this
animal
the
rights.
hill you want to die on? I don't think so.
Well, not even that, but like, if you're on the left, I would consider you're more likely to be an animal rights activist than somebody on the right. I mean, that's fair.
Yeah.
I think that's fair.
Yep.
Right. And so, like, are you okay with innocent animals being experimented on so you can chop your balls off?
Yeah, they wouldn't be, but then they're okay with doing it to kids.
Yeah. Kind of fucked up, but that messaging never really gets put across.
Yeah, it's weird. We've become so polarized, and people just listen to the talking points on the mainstream media that they don't think deeper into these things, and they just want to use fear-mongering against the other side to win elections without actually getting into what's going on in day-to-day lives. But when you put it in simple terms, like, do you want kids to have their private parts cut off? People would say no. But then when they rebrand it and say, well, do you want gender-affirming care? They'll say, oh, we have to do that. We have to care about people. So then they say, oh, we got to support that. But so much of politics is just rebranding things and reframing the conversation that I think it does a disservice to everyday Americans. And if we can get more to the heart of the actual legislation that's being pushed and the actual debates about policy, I think we'd be better off.
No, I agree. I'm also, I don't know if you noticed, but I think I'm actually a school choice product myself.
And what did your journey look like?
I struggled with a lot of learning disabilities as a kid, like a lot. And these disabilities also manifested themselves after I was, this is my theory, right? From what I learned from my family members. And it's that I once I got my MMR shots in bundles as like a 2-year-old, I just started experiencing a bunch of like developmental delays as a kid, right? And so they put me in these like special classes in the public school for a while, put me in like a regular classes for like 3rd grade, failed miserably. And then I went to this private charter school in Queens called the Summit School.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've heard of it or not.
I haven't.
You should look them up. It's actually a really good educational curriculum and program. I don't know what they're like socially, if they like agree with the direction I've been headed, but the point being is that I spent 4th grade through 12th grade in a learning environment where there were 12 kids in my class.
There you go.
And I had a ton of attention. I learned everything on grade level, if not above. Got 12 80s on my SATs, which was good at the time because it was out of 1600. Went to SUNY Binghamton.
Boom.
And feel as though I developed a really good framework for how to like think critically about a multitude of issues.
Yeah, there's actually. Go ahead.
No, and if I had just stayed in public school, who knows?
You would have been told you're a failure the rest of your life.
Maybe I'd be homeless. Who knows what I would be? Because I had no skills, no foundation, no ability to navigate the world independently in any capacity. And because I went to this small school when I was younger, you know, here I am. Like there were obviously some struggles, but you know, I'm really happy with like the self-actualized adult that I've turned into. That may not have happened had I gone to public school. And it's not fair that I'm the only one who gets that opportunity. Everybody should have that opportunity.
Yeah, exactly. There's actually another study related to my earlier work that they looked at charter school lotteries in New York City, because a lot of times they have thousands of kids on wait lists because so many people want them, but they don't have seats for everybody all the time. And they also have a cap on the number of charter schools that can open in New York City because the teachers unions lobbied for that. But they compared lottery winners to the kids who had to stay in the public schools. Both families wanted charter schools, but only one group got it. It basically turns it into an experiment where you can say it causes a difference in outcomes. They found a 100% elimination in the likelihood of crime for the kids who won the lottery to attend a charter school for the male students, because we get in more trouble than females do.
Yeah.
But it also concerns me that we have for a long time told everybody that having a college degree is what leads to actual success, when it doesn't. You have people with college degrees, they don't make any money afterwards. They end up with a lot of student debt. And you have people who didn't go to college who become productive and successful in other ways. I think the real benefit of college, if there is one, is that for historically at least, is that it has become kind of a credential, and they have a piece of paper that they print out that says, oh, you jumped through hoops for 4 years, and that signals to employers that you can follow directions, and so then maybe you can make some money later on in life. But I don't think that's true success. I think if you could build a portfolio and show that you have all these accomplishments in other ways, instead of just, here's my piece of paper, here's my 4-year degree, I think you could be even more successful. And with the 12 student class size, I think that's fantastic. I think what's really grown a lot in recent years is something called micro schools. So when the government schools closed, a lot of people said, I can't afford private school, I'm going to figure out homeschooling, that's hard too. But instead of doing either of those things, they created these miniature schools in their homes and got other parents in the neighborhood to send their kids to that micro school too. So they basically had a school of like 10 kids in their living room, and they economized on the process of homeschooling to make it easier.
I'm a big proponent of that. I think that's
the one-room schoolhouse.
That's the way forward. And I feel as though I had 9 years or whatever of microschooling because of my circumstance.
Exactly.
I had microschooling without microschooling.
So you get the kind of the community aspect of socialization, positive forms of socialization. I mean, I went to government schools, and there were negative forms of socialization.
Very negative, yeah. Everything you learn is wrong.
Well, everything, yeah. I mean, it's all obedience training, and it's all regurgitation. I mean, I did well in public schools, but it's because I had good memory and I could recite things.
Also, socially, the stuff that
drugs, gangs.
What makes you popular in school is like the exact opposite for being like a well-socialized adult.
Exactly. So there's negative forms of socialization. There's, people get beat up in the bathroom. They call it the initiation, the getting rolled into the gang.
Depends on where you're school.
Depends on
the school. That's not happening at Westlake, but that does happen at the Title I schools in the hood.
Exactly. So there is an inequality baked into the government school system today too. And so school choice would be an equalizer, allow less advantaged families to have choices too. Shouldn't be limited to us.
What would happen to those kids who just, are not going to be able to afford, like to kids in those areas whose families are not going to be able to afford to send their kid to private school with that stipend? What's going to happen? What's going to happen to those kids?
I mean, the median tuition in Texas is $10,000, and the proposal is $10,000. So you can get a lot more options than you had before. And let's say that doesn't even count the micro schools and the homeschooling. Let's say you can't afford a $20,000 private school, and by the way, a lot of them cost a lot less than $20,000. Maybe you could afford to figure out a micro school with other families. But let's say, to get to the heart of your question, if they couldn't find any of these other options, my first response is it's more likely to happen. But my second response is because of competition, the school that they're zoned for is going to have to do a better job. They're going to have to think outside the box. They're going to have to improve things. They're going to have to start incentivizing their teachers to focus more on the academics and to do a better job.
I'm agreeing with all of this, but I also live in reality, and not every school is going to be up to the task. And there are going to be a lot of failing schools. And you don't want to create failing communities as a result of these failing schools that refuse to be up for the task. What do we do about those kids?
Which we have today, so we can't live in utopia, right? We have failing communities where they failed going through government schools, their kids are failing going through the same schools, their grandkids are seeing the same proficiency rates near zero, and they're spending more money than ever, they're hiring more people, but it's this never-ending cycle of poverty, and I'd say the government school system perpetuates that. It contributes to inequality, and I'd say any move away from that is a step in the right direction. It's not a perfect solution, it's not a silver bullet, but we don't have any silver bullets in reality today. So let's take the win that we can. There's always going to be outliers that are failed by any policy, but I think this is the closest thing to a great solution that we have in front of us. So that doesn't mean we give up on the public schools altogether. We should still fight at the school board meetings, try to make them do a better job. We should also...
It's going to make them stronger.
Yeah.
It should, in theory, over time, it will actually make the public school system a lot stronger because now there's a direct incentive to focus on what's important for the kids.
Yeah, let's listen to the parents instead of cutting their mics off and calling
and also
them terrorists.
figure out how, restructure these standardized tests because these standardized tests do nothing but teach obedience and memorization.
I think that's a good idea too. So some Democrats in Texas want to get rid of the STAR test, for example. I'm on their side. Okay,
let's go.
Okay,
Sounds great.
They're like, we want to be able to compete. If we're going to have school choice, their argument is we want to be able to have the level playing field. But what they argue is they want to replicate all the regulations that they're complaining about in the public schools. They want to put that on private schools. I'm saying, oh no, let's go the other way like they did in Florida. When they passed school choice for everybody, they deregulated the public schools, allowed them to have more flexibility to compete, and so they can't really. Accuse us of being anti-public school. We're trying to make them better too.
Let's say I'm a public school teacher. Maybe I'm wrong about this because I subbed in Austin for a while, right? If I were to go teach get a long-term position or become a teacher in a high school or middle school, and I decide that I want to teach the kids about how to read a balance sheet.
Yeah.
I'm worried that I could get fired from my job at the district for teaching this
because it's not aligned with the state curriculum.
Yes.
Yeah. Exactly.
That's a problem.
I think that's a problem. Yeah. So we need to free up the market on both ends, not just in the private sector. I'm all for that, obviously, but the hard thing is when it comes to the public schools, you're never going to get away from the reality that we have the school boards that control them, and the state controls the school system too, because in the state constitution at least, there is an education clause that provides for the state to have some involvement in education. But the more that we can convince them at the Capitol to let the localities kind of figure it out, I think that's a step in the right direction. I think we've had this kind of problem for a long time where the state's trying to improve education, but without school choice, if they tweak the system and regulate it, that's not real improvement of educational outcomes. It's not an improvement for parents. They've been trying to fix it from the top down, and so I see where they're going with their top-down tweaks to policy, but it's not really doing anything. I mean, we've seen this at the national level too. We've seen it in other states. If you couple deregulation from the state level in the public schools with competition, I think you can go in both of those directions at the same time. So to answer your question from earlier about what do we do about the kids stuck in the failing school system, I'd say we allow them to compete too. And deregulate them, let them do a better job.
I also think that there's going to be a lot of very wealthy people who made a bunch of money in the private sector that are going to want to step in and say, oh, well, since the government is abandoning these kids, you know what? I got a $10 million net worth. I'm going to go be a teacher because I don't need the money. I can go teach these kids, and I'll step up. And I think you might start getting an influx of people who start stepping up, specifically in these low-income neighborhoods.
Yeah, and some will be better than others, right?
Yeah.
Some of them will do a good job, but the decision to change and choose a school for your child is a big one. There's large transaction costs associated with that, and you're going to want a proven, effective model for your kid. And if there's a one that pops up that's not going to do a good job, they're going to have to really convince these parents and if they don't, guess what? Families can vote with their feet somewhere else. Absolutely. Put them out of business. And I think that's true accountability. Underperforming private schools shut down, underperforming government schools, well, they just get more money because they say, we're failing because we just need more money. It's the definition of insanity.
It's a grift. It's a homeless industrial complex all over again. Yeah. Last thing before we wrap up, and you don't have to talk about this if you don't want to, there was some controversy surrounding some videos that you were in and whatever.
Yeah.
How did that get unearthed? And how have you been addressing a lot of that stuff?
I mean, my political opponents dug it up, and they used that because they know that they can't end school choice on the merits of the logic of the argument. It's the same thing we were talking about earlier. It's attack the messenger, go straight to ad hominem, and so they dug up old.
So you made some videos when you were younger, and there was
I mean, I was in college, and it's some very sick people to dig into your past to bring that up to try to stop your policy disagreement. So this was brought up by people who disagreed with me on school choice policy.
I think it got mentioned. Carton Revolt brought that up.
Yeah, they did.
No, I think I commented. I think I commented, and I'm like, oh, I don't care. He's doing this and this and this for all these kids.
And people people can change over time, and so it's also not hypocritical on my part because I'm not arguing for this kind of stuff to be in classrooms, right? So
You're not arguing. Yeah, I've never heard. I've listened to a lot of your stuff. I've never once heard you advocate for Christian nationalism.
No.
I've never once heard you. You're not even like you're like agnostic. You're not even super religious.
Well, no, I was baptized recently,
really? Okay,
so I'm Christian, but I also respect the rights of parents to choose non-Christian schools.
Yes, yes.
I got into this also as a libertarian, understanding that there are going to be people on the left who disagree with me. The reason that I see school choice is so important is because families are inherently going to disagree about how to raise their kids, and I don't want the state and the government telling you how you have to do that. I think you should be in charge of your own
that
families.
type of shit. That we don't need to go into the specifics of any of that, but that type of stuff is also a byproduct of failing government schools and of the mentality that gets taught to people in these backwards learning systems.
Yeah, I mean, I went to public schools all
Yes,
through K through 12
yeah.
education, so if we want to go there, we can go there. But look, they have negative effects on people's minds, and that could influence you to do things that you regret later on in life, and that you might not think will come up later on in life. So, and that whole industry, it was pretty. I can see how it can be, it can get people wrapped up in the wrong circles at a young age. And so, if anything, this is an argument to not have this kind of content at the K through 12 level in classrooms, so that they aren't lured into an industry that they might regret participating in later on.
I also think that we're in a society where the money's been degraded heavily, and as a result, the culture gets degraded. I'm assuming you're a pretty big Bitcoin proponent if you're a libertarian, or we're a libertarian, right?
A pretty what?
I'm assuming you're a pretty big Bitcoin proponent.
Yeah, for sure. I like competition in the education market as much as I like competition in the market for money.
You were brought up in the Bitcoin standard.
Say again?
Safety and Moose in the Bitcoin standard brought you up as an example of free market principles universally. And
who wrote that book, The Bitcoin Standard?
Safety and Moose.
I was on stage with him at the Bitcoin Magazine conference in Miami a few years ago.
Wow, okay.
Yes, and we were talking all education stuff.
Yeah,
it was him, Daniel Prince.
I don't know who that guy is.
He was moderating the discussion between me and Safety. So, yeah, I think Bitcoin's fantastic, and they said it was going to crash a few years ago, but it's what, like 80-something thousand today?
It's gonna revolutionize our society. All the stuff that we're talking about, Bitcoin is gonna be the way. Maybe not immediately, but within our lifetimes, these problems that we're talking about, from both the left and the right, Bitcoin literally fixes this. It literally will fix this.
Isn't it a stopgap against authoritarian governments too?
Yeah.
Don't the unstable population countries right now that have like dictators, aren't they the most frequent users of Bitcoin?
Yeah.
Because they.
Yeah.
Because their currency is so unstable and. Yep. So I don't know as much about Bitcoin, but I think it's a good idea because there's competition.
And also, the more you create micro schools, you're going to have teachers that are going to say we want Bitcoin payments and X, Y, Z, and all of a sudden now teachers are going to be able to accrue generational wealth. And also, Pomp did a segment a few years ago about how teachers throughout the course of their lives wind up being are the fifth most likely demographic to wind up retiring as millionaires.
Oh wow.
Because they're conservative with their money, they put their money away. A lot of it is also women, and especially with the divorce laws and whatnot, they wind up usually through compound investing, through stocks, through XYZ, or even through second jobs. A lot of teachers, by the time they retire, the older ones specifically, retire as millionaires. A lot of teachers do that, and that's a topic that people don't even bring up or discuss or talk about.
Yeah, and when you look at their bosses, they're making tons of money. Randy Weingarten makes over $500,000 a year, the teachers union president. You look in Texas, we have about a half a dozen superintendents who make more,
a year, yeah.
over $400,000 a year.
So I didn't even know that.
In San Antonio, the guy who Brian Woods, he was emailing or sending out releases saying, basically nudging people to go vote for a $1 billion bond from taxpayers in one of their off-cycle elections. Low turnout elections, special interests can control those things and extort more money from the taxpayer. After I exposed him for doing that, he conveniently retired right after at a young age, and he was making $350,000 a year. And now he's one of the chief lobbyists for the Association of School Administrators.
Oh, gross.
Funny how that works.
Gross.
They fail upwards too much of the time. But yeah, superintendents, they're sucking up all the funding, and they don't do that much to improve student outcomes. And the teachers, they don't get much in terms of raises over time. But they do get a lot of pension benefits and retirement benefits.
Yeah, and which is good. I think it's a good thing that.
If we're gonna spend this much
yeah.
money on education, we should restructure where it's going, and it should go to teachers if there's supposed to be the main component of educational outcomes in the school. It shouldn't be going to all these administrators, superintendents, and luxurious splashdown water parks in the schools.
Or $50 million football stadiums.
Yeah, exactly.
And by the way, I think high school football is awesome.
I played high school football in Texas,
and I think it's
and it
great
was
that
fun playing in the stadium.
These kids deserve to play in 10,000 seat stadiums. It's an amazing experience.
But there's trade-offs.
No, but you can also play in a 20,000 seat stadium without dropping $50 million.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be that much. Yeah.
You can. There's smarter ways to go about this. Corey, how do we get a hold of you?
You can follow me on X. It's at DeAngelis Corey. And you can buy my book. It's The Parent Revolution. It's on Amazon right now or anywhere else. It's 45% off right now. It was endorsed by Trump. It was endorsed by our Senator Ted Cruz. He says on the back, you can ruin Randy Weingarten's day by reading this book, The Parent Revolution.
We got to read it. No choice.
Yep.
Ruin her day.
Yep, exactly. And I have one for you at the hotel. I'll go get you one and sign it for you before we
thank
right
you.
after we get off.
Yes, thank you so much.
And there's my wife over there and my mom and baby.
Amazing.
Oh, we're gonna get him on the camera.
Let's get him on camera. All right.
Come here. We're
Get
still
the picture,
rolling.
The family picture rolling.
Hi, Angelina. How's it going? She's like the super bright sun. Hey, you like that shirt?
That?
You want a Dare shirt?
What's
Hi,
that?
babies. You want to talk? You ready?
Yeah.
You ready to podcast?
You gotta sing into it.
Hi. This is Angelina, and this is my wife, Miranda.
Hello.
Looks beautiful even without makeup
Oh,
on.
gosh.
I don't know how she does it.
Who's that?
Hi. You talking to my dad? Did you kidnap my dad?
Cool. All right, Corey, thank you so much, man.
Thank you.
This really was a pleasure. This is really awesome that we got to do this. I've followed you forever. I'm really glad that I'm really excited about having gotten this done.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, and hopefully I'll see you again in Austin. I live in San Antonio, so I'm not too far away.
No, I'm in Johnson. Yeah, I'm in Johnson. So we can definitely, we should definitely link up. This should not be the last time that we hang out with each other.
All right, cool.
All right,
Thank you. Have a good one.
Absolutely. Thank you.